I am one of the founding members of Heartsight. I was one of the original group of people who got this going and helped build this team and did all of the work to make it what it is today. I had a cardiac arrest when I was 24 years old. And as I had a long recovery, and as I recovered, I started looking for information, and I found a lack of that. There was not a lot of information about what I could expect as far as what lay ahead for me, what the rest of my life was going to look like, and information to understand what my family went through, because they were impacted as well as I was. So I looked for information and I found very little. So I started reading everything I could get my hands on, and I had no background in medical at all, and I taught myself to read research papers and read everything that was not behind a paywall just because I was so desperate for information. And as I was doing this, I also found a community of other people who had been personally affected by cardiac arrest, who had the same need for information to understand what they were going through and what their family members were going through. And not just survivors, but also people who had lost someone, or people who had witnessed a cardiac arrest, or other people. The community included everybody. And so the community became a resource for each other. You know, we wanted a guidebook, and we didn't have one, so we became a guidebook for each other. And while peer support is wonderful, and it certainly fills a need, we were filling a need that we shouldn't have been filling. We needed reputable information that was evidence-based, not just the experiences of others. We needed both of those things, and we deserved both of those things. So Heartsight is the first thing that I have been a part of that has really combined both of the expertise from research, from clinical experience, and also from lived experience. Early on, when I first started getting involved with advocacy things and doing public speaking and things like that, it was often about telling my story. But over the years, my story has become all the stories I've heard from others. I've become a community leader, and I have not just focused on what has happened to me and my family, but what happens to all of the stories I've heard from other people have become my story. And so I carry that around with me. And I've had this need, there's this urgent need to address to make better resources. And it feels very alone sometimes. I felt very alone initially as a survivor, but I found my community, you know, I found my tribe. But I still felt very alone sometimes as an advocate, because there was this huge gap, and if no one was really trying to fill that gap, or was not really addressing those needs that were being so frequently expressed by the community of people who are affected by cardiac arrest. So as we built Heartsight, and we brought together all of these people with different backgrounds who had different perspectives that could come together and collaborate and share all of this, we were able to address this need and get to the future faster, because there's such an urgent need for this. And it was born out of, Heartsight was born out of frustration, but also passion, because all of us are really passionate about whatever our role is in this. And we're all in this position of being people who have helped and advocated for others. And so Heartsight was born from passion, but also from frustration that things were not changing. And to me, Heartsight now represents hope, because we made it happen, and we're starting to create something, and this is just the beginning. All too often, when you hear about cardiac arrest, especially the good outcomes, and I was a good outcome, even though I had a recovery that was very long, I was a good outcome. You know, I'm able to talk today. And so often when you hear those stories, and then they were saved, yay. And that's the end of it. And no one ever, there's not a lot of conversation about what happens after you go home from the hospital, what happens months later as you're processing how this has impacted your life, what happens to the people who were involved in your rescue, whether that was a family member or just a person at the grocery store or whoever that may have been. It's all the part that comes after that has been my focus. I have a lot of people do advocacy work focused on saving lives, and that's wonderful, and we need to do that. My focus has been on how people repair their lives and get back to living. So one of my favorite terms, and I think it was actually a presentation by Sachin, he used the term chronic survivor of cardiac arrest. And I loved that term. It resonated with me so much because forever, for the rest of my life, I'm someone with on my medical chart that I have a personal history of cardiac arrest. And that changes, how I'm perceived by the medical profession, and it also changes how I'm perceived by regular people. When you just drop that into a conversation that I had a cardiac arrest, So you have to learn to incorporate being a survivor into your identity in a way that works for you. And what has worked for me has been, a long time ago, I stopped just viewing myself as a survivor, but I viewed myself as an advocate for other people who had been impacted by cardiac arrest. Not just survivors, but also people who had lost someone, or people who, had been involved in a different way, that loved somebody that survived, with a whole range of outcomes. And I got to know this community mostly by a grassroots Facebook group that has always strived to be as inclusive as possible. We say in our description, it's for anyone affected by cardiac arrest. And so, because there's a lot of people who are left behind in existing resources that are they're invisible. They're not given any guidance on where to go from here, wherever that spot may be. And so Heartsight is the beginning of solving that, of we're not leaving anyone behind, and no one is invisible to us. We see everybody that is impacted in whatever way that may be. I was 24 when I had my cardiac arrest, and I have a normal life expectancy. So that means I have a lot of life after cardiac arrest. And I've had 14 years, and a lot of life has happened since then. I've forged a career, I've traveled, I've done many things, and I'm now expecting my first child. And so it's all the life that comes after cardiac arrest. That's what survivorship means to me. And some of that is wonderful things, and some of that is hard things, because life is full of all of it. And you have to get through it and not carry the weight of your cardiac arrest as you're going through the rest of it. If you have been able to deal with that in the best way that you can, so the rest of life is not so hard. As a survivor, I know that family members are given very little support. My spouse is who gave me CPR, who found me in cardiac arrest. I had a cardiac arrest in bed, and my husband was sleeping next to me, and he had no medical training, and he gave me CPR and did the best he could and called 911 and got me the help that I needed that gave me a chance to survive and to recover. And he was not given any offers of support in the hospital or follow-up or anything like that. And so, as I have seen him deal with it in his own quiet way, I wish, for his sake, that he had been given more opportunities to get support, but also for my own sake. All of my family was affected, and to not have their own space to process that and to deal with that, it affects the whole family. And it's hard sometimes because how you deal with it is not necessarily compatible with how someone you love deals with it. And so everyone is different and has different needs. And to have something that's available and accessible that you can do on your own terms would have been wonderful if all of my family had that available, not just for their sake, but also for mine, because how they're doing affects my life. And I needed them very much as I was recovering to be my support. So support for them would have also been support for me.